Mud, glorious mud. If you're used to living in the UK or in a similar climate, then you're probably quite used to riding in the sticky stuff, but it can still catch you out. So here's a few tips for riding in the mud. In some parts of the world, it's definitely frowned upon or even really discouraged riding in the mud. So definitely listen to sort of local rules, unwritten or not, about riding when the rain has come. Definitely in the US, there's lots of places there where it's discouraged riding in the mud. In the UK, it's muddy a lot of the year, so it's generally fine to get out there. What I would say is it's great to get involved with your local trail organisation. If you're riding in the mud loads, why not help out, do a bit of a dig day, help repair some of the beautiful trails that do get a bit worn away in winter time. Or alternatively, you can kind of pretty much avoid the mud. If you go to some of the official UK trail centres where you'll find they have a good stone surface, they don't get too muddy and they're all weather. Let's start with your bike, because this can make the biggest difference to how hard you find it riding in the mud. And the most obvious thing is getting the right tyres with deep enough tread that will dig into the mud, because sort of lower summer tyres or cross-country tyres, you might find that they sort of float on top of the mud rather than dig in. So you could just add a bit of a more aggressive tyre, or if it's going to be wet for the foreseeable future, you could go to a full mud tyre. You could also think about dropping your tyre pressures a couple of PSI, because the average speeds are likely to be a bit lower in winter. However, if the place you're riding is rocky, then you might think twice about that. To be honest, I keep consistent pressures all year round. It's also a really good idea to make sure your bike is winter ready. So Rich has done a full video on how to winterize your bike. But for me, what I do is I'll make sure the bearings on my suspension linkages are freshly packed with grease. So it's going to keep the worst of the water from the rain, but also from washing the bike out of those bearings. And hopefully your bike will come out the other side of winter in a reasonable condition. Also, you think about protection sprays for your frame, things like silicone lubricant. You can even spray that underneath your mudguard to stop mud sticking to your bike as much. It's also a good idea to start using wet lube for winter time, because if you use your normal summer dry lube, if you go for a long wet ride, it's just going to wash out, so basically there'll be no lube left. So for damp or muddy conditions, you can think about using this to properly lube up that chain. Something like this Bike Protect spray is going to drive out any water, stop any corrosion on bits of your bike, but also give like a non-sticky layer, so next time you ride in the wet, less mud sticks to your bike, so it's easier to clean. I'll also ride in different kit in muddy conditions. Waterproof shorts or trousers, or at least something that won't get saturated in the wet, is nice to keep your legs nice and light. Same with shoes, the kind of water repellent surface on there, so it's not going to get really heavy. Always riding gloves in winter to keep my hands warm, obviously, but also if you fall off, which you're more likely to do in muddy conditions, first thing normally to hit the ground is your hands, so you get them covered in mud. Also lock-on grips, if you're running the old slip-on grips, if water gets under there in rainy conditions, they can come loose, which is super dangerous. Riding glasses or goggles. I do run a front mud guard as well, definitely. In the muddy conditions, if you've not got one of those on, or glasses, you're going to be picking stuff out of your eyes. Also, you don't want to damage your eyes, of course. Goggles are good, but in rainy conditions, they're not as good as glasses, I'd say. All right, enough about kit and bikes, let's go and ride. Can be quite tiring riding in the mud, especially on technical climbs where you've got to go a certain speed to get up them anyway, and now the slop is just slowing you down. You've just got to pedal extra hard. So sometimes it's worth maybe shortening your rides. That's what I do a little bit in the winter. Have short, intense rides where I'm riding really hard, trying to keep my average speed up a little bit, but not going out too long. Keep myself nice and warm as well. I think it's actually really good for your riding skills riding in the mud, if you don't mind getting dirty, because the bike's going to be moving around a lot more than in the dry, sliding around, so you'll learn how to sort of change your weight on the bike and how much difference it makes to what the bike's doing. So when it comes to riding in the grippier times, I think you'll be better at it. Also about sort of keeping that rear wheel driving in the slop, you need to keep enough weight on it so it's not just spinning up and you're losing all your speed. You might see this quite often in the UK, sort of these trail features where someone who's looking after the trail has dug a bit of a sort of rut out the side of like a bowled out piece of the trail or a berm to let the water drain. But in autumn the leaves come down, they get full, so it leaves a big puddle in the track. So thank you Eastridge Trail Partnership for looking after the trail and doing this. Birch needs a bit of clearing. The water's going to drain and the trail's going to stay in a better condition. Shredding corners, squaring them off or inside lines just don't work as well in the wet because you're likely to just slide out. So really try and smooth out your lines. This is a good section actually because you've got a big sort of S bend here. I always find this set of corners actually quite hard in the rain or in the wet, should I say, because they don't quite offer as much support as they look like they're going to, and also there's lots of sort of mulch and leaves on top of here. So I really try and sort of smooth out my input, so line choice wide to wide, but also try not to brake too hard because you are rolling down the hill a bit here, so you are dragging your brakes a little bit. I'm also looking for sort of edges like the side of the track to use as a berm, or even a bit of a muddy rut if I can. As demonstrated up there, I quite like riding in flat pedals, especially in winter time, so you can dab. Means you fall off, or I fall off slightly less because I can get my foot out hopefully and save it. So yeah, I kind of do just split my time still a little bit between flats and clips, but I'm more tempted to ride flats should I say, when it's super muddy. It's good to try and predict where you're going to slide because there's bits all over the track. I'm moving around, and for this section especially, I'm coming in quite quick. So right hand corner and I'm going into the puddle. So I know there's a good chance that the bottom of that puddle is going to be really slippy. So what I do here is a sort of a bit of a manual mid corner. So I know from here to there, my front wheel isn't going to move. It's not going to go in and slide. So I'm sort of guaranteed that my front wheel will stay in a straight line because it's not on the ground, but my back wheel might slide. So I'm just trying to predict those bits. This section of routes is exactly the same. I know it's too slippy to ride, especially when they're wet. So I'm just unweighting both front and back wheel up and over to get back onto the grippy dirt. Well, I think riding in the mud is actually really good fun. Just got to embrace the wetness and the training side of it as well and just get out there and do it. But it's time to repay the favour and look after my bike.